Obviously, compliance drives everything, so many different initiatives in special education. What we know over the last few years, kind of data has become the new compliance. And getting that data is now the challenge that we have around how can we collect it in a way that's manageable for the teachers. I think the other thing to kind of keep in mind around data is that if we require too much data too early, we just won't get it from teachers. One of the things that I'll say is that, we've done research from teachers and asking them what their favorite type of, the characteristics of their favorite types of user-friendly data systems are. And the number one characteristic of those systems is that it doesn't require data. So that's a joke. It's just a feeble attempt at a joke. But because teachers don't like the idea of necessarily collecting data. So we have to be, and obviously everyone here in the room is very sensitive about the more requirements and more work that we put on teachers. So the other thing that we like to do is look at what existing processes are in place, and let's see how we can automate the processes for the teachers so that we can make it easier for them. And then the byproduct of that is obviously the information we need to really evaluate the outcomes for the students. So that's kind of what we do with Review 360, and I'm going to show you kind of real quickly, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes we're seeing when we improve behavioral outcomes for students. And what we're going to do is show you some of the reports and things like that they were talking about. And that's granted if I can get the internet up and running. Okay, there you go. My momentary fear has declined a little bit. This screen, for some reason, is not. It's rather large. But what we wanted to show you a little bit of was what they were talking about in the plan. With the system, what generally happens is we identify the behaviors that the teachers are working on. And for the kids in your behavior programs and special education, obviously the data we want to collect for them comes from the student's behavioral intervention plan. So we want to have a way to collect that information about their objectives, because those are the behaviors that are driving the kids into special education and the demand for the services. So if we can look at how we can collect that information in a useful way, then we could use it in a variety of outlets, whether it's an IEP meeting, whether it's a placement decision, whether it's a program evaluation, or whether it's to determine how we're going to allocate resources more broadly and the effectiveness of our services. The internet is still giving me a little bit of trouble. So if you will, give me 1 second. I've got, I do. So if you guys will just bear with me for a second, and I apologize for the delay. Can you guys see that okay? This is the part of the system where we're just collecting basic information about the kids. And this is the part of the system where they go through and identify what the problem is, the positive behavior that we're trying to promote. This is where the strategies come into place. It recommends different types of strategies we can use with students. Each strategy has implementation guidelines and little videos that teachers can watch in terms of how to implement the strategies. Being in a college of education, one of the things that we know is that of a survey of the college educations around the country, only 15% of them really had a class that focused on classroom management, specific to behavior. A lot of them will have classroom management, but they won't always address behavior specifically in their classroom management. If teachers come from alternative certification programs, the amount of training they typically get, according to the research, is 1 lecture. So it's about 3 clock hours. So, we sometimes take for granted that people kind of know what to do for these kids, and they really haven't necessarily received the adequate training from the universities and their programs, I think, to help them implement these. So that's why we feel like it's important to provide them not only with what to do, but how to implement. and modeling and support for the teachers at the classroom level. The videos, one of the nice things about the videos is we have a lot of different strategies in the system, and we used a two-step approach to decide which strategies we were going to create videos for. The first thing was we looked at teachers' actual use of the strategies, because that is an indicator to us of treatment acceptability, of intervention acceptability. We know from consultation literature, if a teacher doesn't consider something, and from common sense, if they don't consider something acceptable, they just won't use it. So we needed some indicator of acceptability, and that was their pattern of use for us. The second thing that we looked at was actual rates of behavioral progress. So we looked at actual rates of behavioral progress to determine which strategies were most effective. And I'll give you an example. One of the strategies that's most effective when implemented with fidelity is reinforcement. If you have 100 kids and the teachers are using reinforcement, approximately 70% of those kids, or 70% of the kids, will be meeting their goals 80% of the time or better. You still will have some kids who don't respond well to reinforcement, but it's a very effective strategy. So that's how we came up with what we're doing here. The next thing that we do, and this one's pretty intense because this is an example of a plan for a teacher that's in a self-contained environment. Right? In a self-contained environment, they're typically implementing a point system, right? Do you guys, like the points in the level system? So what we do is we basically automate that for them. They keep track of the information on paper or on a mobile device, and then the information's uploaded into the system. And then it keeps track of what level the kid's at, how many points they've earned, their rates of progress. And all this, what we know is because every district does it differently, you have to configure your processes to match the district's process. So we don't want to come in with just one system or size fits all. It's got to be braided. What this tells us a little bit is that this student earned his full points, able to provide on-task response for every period except fourth period and seventh period. Do you see that? Does that make sense? So we're just taking that point sheet and we're putting it into the system basically. We're evaluating how the strategies, we're looking at how often the problem behaviors occur. And then what we do is we can generate different types of reports. And one of the reports that we can look at is some sort of daily report card. Remember the teacher talking, or the parent talking about how she knew how the kid did before he got home? It's because they email this to the parents a lot of times. So having a procedure, one of the things I think we do, we actually do a pretty good job of in schools is collecting information. But what we don't always do as good of a job about is sharing that information with other stakeholders. So teachers collect a lot of information, but do they get it back in a usable format that makes sense to them? And I don't think they do a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons why teachers feel the way they do about data, because I don't see how it impacts them on a day-to-day basis. So having a process where the information you're collecting is shared back with the teachers and the parents is obviously important. We also know that kind of sends a message that we're monitoring the implementation in some way. And we know that one of the number one ways to improve implementation of any initiative is to monitor the implementation. So this is data that gets generated about a day. The teachers tend to like this because it keeps track of all the level stuff for them, keeps track of how the kids are doing. And then, it wouldn't be a behavioral system without charts, right? So we chart all different types of things. We can break things down by period, by behavior, by strategy, things like that. And then we also have an improvement analysis report that we use, right? So we'll plug in the dates of how we want to look at the outcomes of the kids' behavior over time. A lot of districts will use this for extended school year services to evaluate the need for ESY services. Because you could put in 3 date ranges and have the percent of time the kid's meeting his goal before the break, after the break, and then the recoupment period. So that's another way that we use the data. And then there's a summary report. And the summary report, in the example that the parent was talking about, this is something that would be shared with the parent typically every 3 weeks. So something like this would be shared with the parent along with the charts. And this tells us the percent of time the kid's meeting his goals for the different objectives. It tells us how often the problem behaviors are occurring. It tells us on average how much time they're spending in general education settings. It tells us overall the percent of time the kid's meeting goals for the plan. So it's really kind of evaluating the plan.